Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Tuesday. It's August 19, 2025. Hope your day is going well so far as we moved quickly through the month of August. My goodness, getting toward the end of August already. But that's okay. Every day is a gift, and we have a great gift for you this morning, as in so many wonderful guests right off the bat after the news and the weather, of course. As we always do on Catholic Connection, we are going to talk about St. Peter, but in a different light. Our friend Steve Ray is joining us, of course, author, speaker, convert to the faith, our own Jerusalem Jones. He has a really cool article on the Catholic Answers magazine, and in their magazine on their website as well, about St. Peter, the astute businessman and civic leader. Oftentimes, St. Peter is portrayed as someone, who put his foot in his mouth quite often, and a lot of people don't think all that highly of him. But I'll tell you what, as Steve says, he's presenting another perspective on Simon Peter, looking at his family and social life, his business qualities, and the qualities Jesus saw, qualities that others often missed. He says, I want to introduce you to Peter, the entrepreneur, the astute manager, respected and charismatic leader, and the chosen of Jesus to be the first CEO of the Catholic Church. And being that Steve has studied this extensively, not just through Scripture, but through his many, many visits, hundreds of visits to the Holy Land, I think he's a perfect person to discuss this. So he'll join us right after the news again and the weather here on a Tuesday morning. Also, I'm looking forward to, and it's actually kind of a similar discussion. We're going to check in with our friend Stephen, Two Stevens. It's the hour of Two Stevens today. Stephen Henley, who's president of the wonderful Catholic executive group Legatus. And we're going to be talking about the takeaways for Catholic professionals from Pope Leo's first 100 days. And there was an article shortly after Pope Leo was elected, his first 16 days, that was on the Register that talked about how he was crushing it, how Pope Leo was crushing it in so many ways. We'll get Stephen's perspective as someone who leads a very prominent and a well-known professional organization, Legatus. We'll also tell you a little about Legatus and maybe let you know if you'd like to join or not, how you do that. So that is the first hour of the program. Steve Ray and Steve Henley on a Tuesday morning, August 19th, 2024. So what's going on with the weather? Well, we've got that storm surge from Tropical Storm Erin that we're keeping an eye out on. So tropical storm conditions and coastal flooding are possible in the North Carolina Outer Banks beginning late Wednesday. Tropical storm and tropical surge watches are in effect. Major Hurricane Erin is expected to bring life-threatening surf and rip currents along the East Coast beaches this week. Hot to extremely hot temperatures across the southern plains, the Mississippi Valley today, and California. Now, it's interesting. She's not even coming to the coast and reaching land in the U.S., but because of how large she is, even though she's been downgraded a bit, and we'll have a story for you about that in the news, she's still causing major trouble if you're going to be on the coast of Carolina, maybe taking a late vacation and trying to swim. Be very, very careful, and we'll bring you up to date on that. We appreciate your listenership here on Catholic Connection on EWTN. And again, our guests this morning, Steve Ray and Steve Henley, here on the first hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN. Right now, it is almost 4 minutes past the hour. A lot of news to get through, including an update on the meeting with European allies with the President of the United States at the White House yesterday. So let's get started with the news on the one, the only EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Well, as we mentioned, President Trump and U.S. European allies, as Tammy Trujillo tells us, are expressing optimism, but they're expressing it cautiously when it comes to a deal to end the Ukraine-Russia war.
Trump hosted Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky, European leaders, and the head of NATO at the White House Monday to try and hammer out a deal. Trump and Zelensky spoke one-on-one first, and both called their meeting productive. Every leader, including Trump, has indicated any deal would have to involve American security for Ukraine to head off any more Russian aggression. The president says he's already spoken to Russia's Vladimir Putin by phone about the developments and is hoping to set up a future three-way meeting between himself, Putin, and Zelensky. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Meanwhile, Russia carrying out drone attacks on central Ukraine overnight, with local officials saying it shows that the president, Vladimir Putin of Russia, does not want peace. The attacks, again, coming after that meeting, as you just heard, between President Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and European leaders at the White House to talk about how to eventually end the war that began by Russia in 2002 in their invasion. By the way, it was the largest overnight attack by Russia this month, officials say, with Ukrainian officials also reporting 270 drones and nearly a dozen missiles being launched. Meanwhile, Hamas says it will accept the latest ceasefire proposal to end the conflict with Israel and Gaza. But as Blake Sifton reports, whether Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu can get on board, well, that remains to be seen at this point.
Hamas said on Monday that they have accepted a new proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza put forth by Qatari and Egyptian mediators. The proposal is said to be very similar to one discussed last month without a breakthrough and involves a 60-day ceasefire that would see the release of roughly half of the Israeli hostages remaining in captivity in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. On Saturday, Prime Minister Netanyahu again insisted that Israel is no longer interested in partial deals and will only agree to end the war if Hamas releases all of the hostages at once and agrees to various conditions. Blake Sifton, Tel Aviv.
Meanwhile, Father Gabriel Romanelli, the parish priest of the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza, telling Vatican News that the parish neighborhood in Gaza City is not under an evacuation order, even though it was reported by several media outlets yesterday. He's reiterating, meanwhile, his invitation to pray for peace. There has been no order of evacuation in this area of our neighborhood. Father Romanelli is the parish priest again of the parish in Gaza, and he made that declaration to the media today, actually, for an update. Several hundred people have taken refuge at the only Catholic church in Gaza since the outbreak of the war back in 2023. A tank round struck the church on July 17th, killing 3 people and injuring several others, including Romanelli, whose leg was slightly hurt. In the wake of that incident, the Pope prayed for the victims by name, calling for an end to what he called the barbarism of war and expressing his hope for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. An Ohio man admitting to attacking a group of Ohio State students in Columbus simply because they are Jewish. Timur Mamatov pleading guilty to violations of the Hate Crimes Prevention Act in federal court last week. U.S. prosecutors say he was with his friends outside a bar near the OSU campus 2 years ago in November of 23 when he actually punched a student after seeing he was wearing a necklace with a Jewish symbol. At least one other student was hurt in the fight as well. Mamatov will be sentenced by a federal district court at a later time. And the Council of European Bishops Conference and the Conference of European Churches releasing a joint statement ahead of this year's season of creation. Devin Watkins with Vatican News tells us the annual period of prayer for our common home begins on September 1st, the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation, and runs until October 4th, of course, the feast of the great St. Francis of Assisi.
In their statement, European church leaders recalled the prophet Isaiah's vision of a garden of peace, which points to the theme for this year's event, Peace with Creation. They also invited Christian communities to embrace a sober life and respect the gifts of creation, while rejecting the exploitation of natural resources and all people. The ecumenical leaders said the reference to Isaiah's vision of peace can lead humanity to return to a way of life rooted in trust and devotion to God. Seeking peace with creation is not an abstract ideal, but a daily commitment, they said, adding that it is a call to live in a way that honors the giver of life. Even if our world can hardly be seen as a garden of peace nowadays, said the church leaders, God constantly offers humanity an alternative to catastrophe. The season of creation comes ahead of the UN's COP30 climate conference in Belém, Brazil, which is set for November 10th through 21st later this year. The joint statement expresses hope that world leaders will prioritize the needs of the poor and vulnerable while directing international relations toward the common good. Christians, they said, are invited to prayer, conversion, and advocacy so that our way of living may echo what we believe and confess.
President Trump is moving to eliminate mail-in ballots ahead of the 2026 midterm elections.
Are you going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots? We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country.
The president sharing a post on Truth Social yesterday outlining his plan to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots, and it targets what he called highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines. Trump has previously claimed there's been widespread voter fraud involving mail-in ballots and pledged to fight for election integrity. While the president's post is calling for an end to the mail-in ballots, an effort to dramatically overhaul the way federal elections are run has faced legal roadblocks in recent months. A federal judge down in San Antonio hearing arguments in a lawsuit over the state's new 10 Commandments law. Jonathan Saez with the group Texas Value says there is a great deal of legal precedent as to why the Bible can be hung, or the verses can be hung, in public school classrooms. The law is being challenged by the ACLU, which argues it violates the separation of church and state. It goes into effect next month, but posters of the Ten Commandments are already being posted in several Texas school districts. And younger generations are apparently picking up the Bible in increasing numbers, and it's a trend that's being seen not only here in the U.S. The UK's Quiet Revival report shows a 16% increase in church attendance among 18 to 24-year-olds, and Russia, meanwhile, saw sales of the Bible grow by 50% last year. A woman from Arizona now recovering after she was beaten unconscious and bloodied during a concert at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena over the weekend. This man says the entire event in California was a mess as far as crowd control goes.
It was honestly out of control. It was a circus. It was not safe, and I'm very angry.
It happened on Saturday night during a sold-out Rufus Du Sol concert. The woman says she and a friend accidentally spilled a bit of a drink on a man and immediately apologized for it. The man claiming, though, that it was intentional, and when he returned about a half an hour later, he actually punched the woman in the face. The video shows a man launching himself into a group of people and throwing at least 5 punches, knocking out the woman. The man so far has not been arrested. And the first hurricane of the 2025 Atlantic season is churning to the east of the Bahamas as a Category 3 storm. As we mentioned in the weather, as of Monday night, the storm has maximum sustained winds of 125 miles per hour. Forecasters say Hurricane Erin is expected to bring high surf and possible tropical storm conditions to part of the Bahamas and the U.S. Atlantic coast. North Carolina's Outer Banks could see coastal flooding and tropical storm conditions late tomorrow. And along the Jersey shores, some communities have already banned swimming at their beaches because of the dangerous surf conditions that the storm is already creating. Daniel Martindale tells us there's an extreme heat wave expected to start baking Southern California this week.
Forecasters say the heat will peak on Thursday and Friday with highs of 94 degrees in downtown Los Angeles and highs of 108 degrees in Woodland Hills. Highs will be 10 to 20 degrees above normal and could break records. Extreme heat and fire weather advisories for much of the region take effect tomorrow and will last through Saturday night. Portions of the mountains and foothills of LA and Ventura counties will be under a red flag warning during that time due to gusty winds and low relative humidity. I'm Daniel Martindale.
State of West Virginia is suing the company it considers the main architect of the opioid crisis, a pharmacy benefits manager, Express Scripts. West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey says the lawsuit claims Express Scripts, now known as Evernorth Health, committed misconduct that was complex, far-reaching, and violated state and federal health laws in many ways. The suit claiming it also conspired with opioid manufacturers to deceptively market those drugs. And over 122,000 ladders sold at Home Depot are now being recalled due to their locking mechanism failing, putting users at risk of a fall. The recall includes 20 and 24-foot Multi-Max Pro models sold between November of 21 and February of last year. The manufacturer, Werner Company, says owners should stop using the ladders immediately and register online for a full refund. And the Federal Trade Commission is suing a ticket seller, it says, used fake accounts to buy Taylor Swift concert tickets to sell at a markup. The feds say Key Investment Group used thousands of fake Ticketmaster's accounts to buy the tickets for her wildly successful Eras tour. The company already sued the FTC in July for similar efforts. It is a Tuesday. We're happy you're with us here on EWTN Global Catholic Radio, and something to think about when it comes to St. Peter. Stay tuned. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. 16 minutes past the hour. Great to be with you. Always great to have my friend Steve Ray with us. He brings so much insight into Scripture and also other stories from the Bible, and really has us look maybe sometimes very differently at key players, as we might say in common language, in the Bible, especially those who began Christianity and were at the beginning of the church, including our very first Pope, St. Peter. So, Steve, you mentioned this story idea to me when we were having dinner at the Mackinac Conference, the Grand Hotel Getaway, and I thought that is so fascinating. I love the idea because sometimes we may see a particular portrayal of someone from the Bible, whether it's on a TV show or in an article, and we don't bother to stop and think and go back and visit the Scriptures ourselves and to pray about it to see what the Lord's really trying to say. I don't think there's anybody better to talk about this than you, being that you've been to the seashore, you've been to Capernaum, Bethsaida, you've been all over Israel so many times, and you've walked in the footsteps of these saints repeatedly. You've talked to people who could be descendants, who knows, of St. Peter, but certainly have the same craft as fishermen. So how did you come to this very powerful conclusion about St. Peter? And I'm just reading the title of your article for Catholic Answers, CEO of the Catholic Church. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, I wrote the article for Catholic Answers magazine, but that article had come from a talk that I gave at the National Summit for Legatus, who are, as you know, businessmen. It's a big organization.
Yeah, they're coming up next on the Pope. They're on the same show you are, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so they asked me to speak about Peter, the businessman, and I said if Peter was alive today, he would probably be a member of Legatus, which surprised all of them because I think Peter gets a bad rap. We have certain things in Scripture that we come to the conclusion that he's a bumbling idiot, and I really think that's a very poor view of him. That's why I wrote this, to kind of recover his character a little bit. But yes, I've been to the Holy Land. We did a whole movie on Peter called Peter the Keeper of the Keys, where we followed him all through the Holy Land and all the way to Rome. And I went fishing one night, all night, with two Jewish fishermen, Udi and Mimi. And when I was out there, I just all of a sudden dawned on me, I'm out here with Peter and Andrew, James and John, fishing all night on the Sea of Galilee, catching the same fish they did, the fishermen speaking in Hebrew. And I was taken back, transported 2,000 years. So I started thinking about Peter, and a lot of this came from looking at the Scripture, but a lot of it also came from the Holy Land and from looking at Capernaum, where he lived and where his house was, and the different things that we learn about him from his daily life and what it was like to be a fisherman and a businessman. So that was all put together, and I came up with this. Now, first of all, I just set the stage because these are the kind of things that we think of. Jesus once rebuked Peter by saying, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Why did he do that? Because Peter was trying to defend him. And he didn't understand the big picture yet. But as a man and a loyal friend of Jesus, he was ready to defend him and do what any good friend would do. But Jesus saw it in the bigger picture. He refused to let Jesus wash his feet. So people say, "Oh, that was dumb." No, it's not. I would have said the same thing. He was a man who respected Jesus. And I've been walking through donkey dung. My feet are filthy. Don't get down there and wash my feet. And there's a whole list of them. He fell asleep at the Mount of Transfiguration. He cut off a man's ear in the Garden of Gethsemane. He tried to walk on water, but he sank. He denied Jesus 3 times. So we take these things and say, "Oh, what a loser. What a loser Jesus picked. How did he ever pull it off to let that guy be his spokesman in the book of Acts and to be the head of the church?" So that's kind of where the idea got started.
Well, but you make some great points here. He was the only one in terms of getting out on the water when he saw Jesus walking toward him. He's the only one who had the guts to go out and try to get out of the boat, or get out of the boat at least, even though he sank, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Jesus says, "Come on and walk out to me." And Peter's the only one that said, "Lord, bid me to come out to you." He trusted the Lord, and he got up and he did walk on the water. None of the other guys even had the guts or even the inclination to ask Jesus that, and yet Peter did walk on the water. I think that's why Jesus loved Peter. Every one of those situations that I mentioned is something good about Peter. There's a good characteristic. And getting out and walking on the water, he looked down and he said, "Wait a minute, I can't walk on the water." And he started to sink. He lost his faith. But guess what? Jesus took him by the hand, and Peter walked on the water all the way back to the boat, holding Jesus' hand, and we don't often think about that. But he was the one that had the courage to do it. He's the one that carried the sword. He was like the security guard for Jesus in Gethsemane. In fact, Jesus had said, "Bring swords with you. If you got 2 swords, that should be good enough," he said in the upper room. And Peter was the one who actually did it. He was the one that carried the sword, and he stepped out to defend Jesus. Why would Jesus say to bring a sword if he didn't want me to defend him? He cut off Malchus' ear. He fell asleep. Oh, at the Transfiguration, he said, "Let us build 3 booths." And people say, "What a stupid thing to say. We don't build 3 tents up there." Well, but we don't realize that was the Festival of Booths. That's what Pope Benedict said in his book on Jesus of Nazareth. It was the season for the Festival of Booths, and the Jews are required to build booths and live in them. So he is the only one that remembered what the law actually taught and said we should implement it here while we're here. So all of these things, Peter is much more brilliant than we give him credit for. But what I really did was looked at where his house was and where his business was and why he was in Capernaum, and he was born and raised in Bethsaida. That's where he learned how to fish. And in this article, I write a whole little story telling you what it was like when him and Andrew were boys watching their father come in Bethsaida, not in Capernaum, and how he learned fishing and then turned it into a business in Capernaum. We can talk about why he
Sure,
moved to
but let me go
Capernaum,
back to the points that you make about Peter and some of the frustrating things about his personality. But what at the end of the day, as you said, if you look at those, you read between the lines, it's about someone who had passion and a great love for Jesus, even though he didn't make the best decisions in terms of emotions, right?
Yeah. And he would oversell himself to a degree. I'll never let anybody touch you. I'll die for you, Jesus. And that is a good impulse. I think Jesus loved that in him. He knew that Peter was overselling himself. He couldn't deliver on what he was selling, but I think he loved the impulse. He loved the heart that said, I am just a man, but I'm going to stand up for you. Everybody else is trying to kill you, but I'm going to defend you, Lord, because I love you and I believe in you, and you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. This is the heart of Peter. So when he actually did deny Peter, we see his weaknesses. Yes, everybody's got their weaknesses, but the whole idea of wanting to defend Jesus and all the things that happened with Peter, the things that we look at and say, oh, he was an idiot. You know, it was really, if you look on the other side of the coin, it was a quality Peter had that Jesus saw in him.
Yeah, and Jesus, of course, being God, all-knowing and all-powerful and omnipotent, would know his experience in terms of organization, bringing people together, running a business. And in order to be the CEO of the first church and the one true church, you'd have to have someone who had some experience in that. So that's what we're going to look at when we come back. We're talking about St. Peter, and my friend Steve Ray for Catholic Answers Magazine wrote a powerful piece. St. Peter, CEO of the Catholic Church. The first pope, the subtitle says, is often portrayed as a bumbling, impulsive lightweight. But Jesus saw much more than that. And Steve, it's such a good article. Is it still on the Catholic Answers website? Where can people find it?
Yeah, if you go to Catholic.com and just type in CEO in the find box right on the top. Go to Catholic.com. Type in CEO and the article pops up. And it's on my website, too. If you type in CEO in my search engine, CatholicConvert.com, it'll pop up, too.
Before we take a quick break, and then we'll come back and pick up where we left off, especially with going back to his house and where he grew up, which I think is really, really important. I think this is a reminder for us not to buy into a lot of the imagery we see out there in the media that portrays saints or particular people a certain way. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, I would. I think that... I think of movies and TV shows about biblical scenes. It's hard for me to watch because I always want to argue with them because I have been there. I've thought about these things, and I just can't. Yes, we should be very careful how we believe in saints. For example, Thomas is another one. He gets the bad rap as doubting Thomas, but he's the only one that said, you were my God.
My Lord and my God,
Yeah, and he went all the way to India.
Yep, more with Steve Ray when we come back on a Tuesday morning, August 19th. St. Peter, the astute businessman and civic leader. We'll explain coming up next. August 19th, 2025. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN's Global Catholic Radio and this program, Catholic Connection, as you heard, produced by EWTN out of Irondale, Alabama, where we just marked 44 years on the air. Praise God. Next weekend, not this Saturday, but next Saturday is a big family celebration. You can find out all about it at EWTN.com. One of our family members, Steve Ray, joining us this morning, apologist, speaker, author, and convert to the faith. FootprintsofGod.com for his wonderful pilgrimages, and CatholicConvert.com for a ton of great info on the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. We are talking about St. Peter, CEO of the Catholic Church. Beautiful article by our friend Steve Ray on Catholic.com, the website for Catholic Answers. As we said in the first segment, sometimes the first pope is often portrayed as a bumbling, impulsive lightweight. But Jesus saw so much more than that. Okay, let's move on to his background, St. Peter's background, because there's a lot to say for, as they say in real estate, location, location, location. Why did he move his family to Capernaum, Steve?
Okay, I'll do it real fast because I know time is short. He was raised in Bethsaida, which is at the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee. That's where it means house of the fishermen, Bethsaida, house of the fishermen. He and Andrew and Philip were born and raised there. So he was raised with fishing with his parents, his dad, and all of his probably uncles. And that his little boys, they'd be out there watching him. And he learned the trade, and eventually he has his own business. But when he started his own business, he realized that you have to take your fish. Magdala, which is down at the southern side, farther south on the Sea of Galilee, was where they processed the fish. They smoked it, salted it, dried it, and prepared it. Because you can't leave a fish sitting out for very long. It's going to rot. You know what a fish smells like after a day. So they had to prepare the fish. So they'd had to get them from Bethsaida to Magdala, and doing so they had to cross a line, a property line between two provinces. And guess who was at that line? It was Matthew, the tax collector. So Peter took his fish across, paid taxes to Matthew, and then took him down to Magdala, brought him back, and paid taxes again. By the way, the fish in Magdala was so famous that it was even mentioned in writings in Rome. They knew of the fish of Magdala. They ate it there. So Peter said, you know what? Let's save the taxes. I'm going to avoid taxation. Let's just move to Capernaum, which is on the other side of the line, and then when we take our fish to Magdala, we don't have to pay the tax. So he knows how to avoid taxation. He's also he has a business. He has partners. It says that during even the heavy season, the high season, that they hired temporary labor. He's partners with Zebedee, James, and John. He and Andrew own fishing boats. The others own fishing boats. They're a good-sized company. It's not cheap to own a fishing boat. That's a big thing. And he owned boats. And remember when he comes back after the resurrection in John 21, when Jesus is kind of out and about and they don't know where he is, what Peter says is, I'm going to go fishing again. Well, he obviously still had his boats. Somebody else was running his business for him while he was with Jesus. Otherwise, where would he get the boat? That's a speculation on my part, but I think it's a good one. And so he had employees. He had helpers. He had partners. He made a good living doing this fishing. And they knew what they were doing because they'd learned it from their parents. So this business that they had was a substantial business. And Peter is not a bumbling fool if he has that kind of a business, if he can run it with partners. I've had businesses. I know that. I know that you can't be an idiot to run a business. You've got to be decisive, which Peter was. Take risks, which he did. Work with other people in doing something, which he did. So all of these are qualities that Jesus saw in this man, Peter, and he says, by nature, you have the qualities of a CEO, and by grace, I'm going to develop those, and wait till you see what I do. Peter becomes the CEO, I'm just using that kind of facetiously, but it's true, of the longest and largest existing corporation office that has ever existed. There's no office or in industry, so to speak, if you want to think of the Catholic Church that way, there's no, it has lasted as long or as big as the Catholic Church, and Jesus chose this man to get it started.
I love the fact that in the article you quote scripture and reference the business background. For example, you say in Luke 5:7, they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats, so they began to sink. Mark 1:20, confirming this, as you say, Jesus called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed them. So the fishing boats, obviously they had several fishing boats. For the sake of time, though, let's move on to their home, Peter's home in Capernaum. You know, real estate agents are always saying location, location, location. So true for St. Peter and his family, right?
This is what triggered the whole thing, Teresa, because the house of Peter is marked today by a church. The Franciscans discovered where, that's a whole story in and of itself, how they knew that was Peter's house, and Jesus lived there for 3 years with Peter. That was his home base. That was his office when he was in the north. And that home is right on the shoreline. The harbor where all the fishing boats came in, where all the business took place, his house is right on the harbor. That is prime real estate. Capernaum goes, when you're there, you can look out, you can see all over in the field where Capernaum was, 1,500 people or so, a lot of dwellings. But Peter's was right on the waterfront. And guess what's on the other side of Peter's house? The synagogue. Peter's house is right between the bay, the harbor with all the businesses, and on the other side of his house is the synagogue. That's like living next door to the governor. He is obviously not only a very good businessman with a very nice piece of property, but his house was big enough. It said the whole city came to his front door. Well, how does the whole city come to your front door unless you've got a pretty good-sized front porch, so to speak, a good expanse of land? In a city that is very compact, the rest of it is all compact. There's hardly any walking space between the houses. Here, he's got enough for all the people to come to his front door. And it's right between the harbor and the synagogue. That is prime location. And I put up a picture I sent you of what his
it looks
home
great.
probably looked like.
It's so cool.
Multi-story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And other people live there. His mother-in-law, Andrew, lived there. It's a good-sized house. So Peter obviously was a civic leader, not just a good businessman with a prime piece of real estate, but he would have been considered a civic leader in a home like that. And when the tax collectors came and said to Jesus, "Have you paid your tax?" Who did they go to? They didn't go to Philip or Andrew. They went to Peter and said, have you guys paid your taxes yet? Because they knew he was also the business leader of the group.
Well, we have to wrap up. We have about 2 minutes left, and I wanted to read a paragraph from your article. We are told that grace builds on nature, you say. Jesus saw in Peter the qualities needed for leadership and decision-making. The Holy Spirit built on the character of a man Jesus named Rock. Jesus appointed him the shepherd of his flock, John 21:15-17, and Jesus chose him as a royal steward of his kingdom and delegated to him the keys of the kingdom. I think this is a great article because it really forces you to think and to ponder, as our Blessed Mother did, Scripture, and to look at it differently, and don't always just assume that what a particular media outlet or TV show or film is saying or have said about Peter over the centuries and over the years is true, or anybody in the Bible, right?
Yep, exactly. And if people want to go see Capernaum and have Mass at the house of Peter, and I can show you all this personally, we're going back December 28th. We've already got people registering, and we're going back December 28th, and I can't wait to get back to the Holy Land and show people all of this. But yes, Peter, he looms large in the New Testament. Jesus saw something in him that with the qualities in him that he could build upon and that he could put in charge of his huge endeavor that was going to be worldwide, the biggest institution, the longest lasting office in the world.
Yep, and God never wastes his time. He knew exactly what he was doing with Peter in terms of all that experience in the fishing business, and he used it, of course, for Peter as the rock, the first pope. Steve, great discussion. Thank you so much. You can find Steve's information on his pilgrimages, footprintsofgod.com, and also everything on the homepage, the main homepage, catholicconvert.com. We'll be right back on a Tuesday. Stay tuned. Continuing along the same lines in terms of understanding what Catholic executives can bring to the table, of course, we talked about St. Peter being a Catholic executive, and Stephen Ray even gave a similar talk to a Legatus chapter, and the Legatus people were very convinced that definitely St. Peter, if Legatus were around, over 2,000 years ago, he would have been a member, maybe even Stephen Henley from Legatus, a chapter president. What do you think? Good morning.
I think the founder he probably would have been the founder, but good morning to you. St. Peter is our patron of Legatus for that particular reason. And it's great going on pilgrimage with Steve Ray and being able to see the prominence of St. Peter, where his house was, the synagogue, and everything he shares in that article just expounds upon that topic. So.
Well, we're talking about the current Peter, the Vicar of Christ, Pope Leo, right, the successor of Peter, talking about him and his first, I can't believe he's been 100 days already, and what Catholic professionals can take away from that, especially Catholic professionals in Legatus. But let's give people a little background about Legatus. I know all about it. Deacon Dom and I were members for many years, but our travel prohibited us from staying involved in this fine organization. It's a great group, and it really was Tom Monahan's idea to really be, legate means ambassador in the workplace. Let's talk about how big Legatus is now and how people might get involved if they're interested.
Sure. So Legatus was founded about 38 years ago by Tom, as you said, after an inspiring experience he had with Pope St. John Paul II as a result of a special invitation from Cardinal Shaka of Detroit to visit JP2. And it was after that experience that Tom said, you know what, we need an organization like the secular one that he was a part of, Young Presidents Organization, which was for CEOs and presidents, but we need one for Catholics so that we can support each other, know who our fellow Catholic CEOs and executives are, but also so that we can, as we read and see in Proverbs, iron sharpens iron, so that we can call each other to the carpet and truly be, as you said, ambassadors, legatus, ambassadors for Christ in the marketplace on all aspects of our life. And so we have about 90 chapters, about 5,500 members across North America, with the sole purpose of bringing them together on a monthly basis to support each other, to learn more about their faith, and to ground them in the faith as well and in the sacraments. We start every meeting with every chapter with rosary, confession, and mass, talk, reception, dinner, and a speaker, which you and Steve, Ray, and many other speakers have graced us with your presence.
Well, if we're talking about Catholic professionals, it's interesting to look at Pope Leo. I can't believe it's been 100 days already. But what are your takeaways, Stephen, as the head of Legatus, a fine organization representing business people? What do you think so far? Is he crushing it, as one article in the National Catholic Register said early on in his papacy? What do you think?
I'm not a White Sox fan, but I might be after seeing his first 100 days. He's really gone into this as you would hope any CEO would go into a new job. He's going in and listening, and he's actually taken some of the lessons that Pope Francis tried to encourage the priests of smelling like your sheep. And I think he's really taking a step to listen to the people, to be with the people. And I think, we haven't seen any real appointments per se of any of the dicastery heads, or to kind of see where he's leaning towards. And we haven't had enough, bishop appointments either to be able to see much in terms of that. But he's, I think, reminding us of what the Pope is meant to be, and that is an alter Christus, the head of the church here in the U.S., here in the world. And then also to not be playing into the political talking points anywhere in the world. And so as a result of that, everybody is talking about him because of his, good shepherd kind of spirit that he's leading with. So, as far as I've seen and talking to other Legatus members, we're pleasantly pleased because he's taking the pulse, and he's being with the people and just trying to take it all in and learn as much as he can in his first couple months as Pope.
Talking with Stephen Henley, president of the fine organization Legatus. He served as the international president since 2016. One thing that impressed me and Deacon Dom, we were there in Rome for Habemus Papam, and I know you recently came back from a pilgrimage to Rome as well, shortly around that same time with Legatus. But the minute he came out on the loggia, the first thing he said, "Peace be with you." And if you look at it from a professional perspective, if you look at it from a business or a boss perspective, you want someone that exudes peace. Not confusion, not excitement, not taking sides. I'm not saying that this is what Pope Francis did. I'm just saying as a leader, he just exuded this, okay, let's all take a breath, remember who we are, and let's all be peaceful. I give you my peace. And you want that, I think, in a leader. You want calm. You want a professional demeanor. And the fact that you mentioned, and I think this is huge as someone who is an interviewer, listening, sitting down and listening to people.
Yeah, I would describe it as humble confidence. He walked up there, he was confident, he embraced the will of God. Not that he was looking for this, looking for the white hat, but he embraced it, but he humbly went in there, and shared the peace with everybody. And then also, like I said, he's been listening, and it's a profound example for all of us, whether it's starting a new role, starting a business, or just being around the dinner table and putting on our listening ears. That's one of the things that we often lack is the art of listening. And I think that he's really exuding that. And being in Rome, we were there with the Legatus pilgrimage, I would say during the lull. So after Pope Francis passed away, but before the conclave started. And there was just a calmness, a quietness about Rome that I've not seen. It was after what would have been the canonizations. So a lot of people had left, and it was before the conclave had started. And so it was just really neat to be able to see these cardinals and walking around and being able to see them meet with each other and discuss and have these meetings before the conclave to pray about who was going to be the next pontiff.
You and Legatus, you're very much obviously in touch with Rome and in touch with the cardinals and leaders of the church, as you just mentioned. And what are you hearing from your own leaders, chapter presidents? What are they saying? What has been the impression of Legatus members around the country and the world regarding the new pope? What are they saying, Stephen?
I think it's a reinvigorated confidence in the church and in the depoliticization of the church. You know, and not that I'm not going to say that Pope Francis did that, but there were a lot of question marks, you know, at the end of statements and things. And I think giving us this confidence, and then also a kind of a sigh of relief almost in that, you know, perhaps an American pope, you know, obviously this is a unique time, but perhaps an American pope will understand us. And it's like, well, maybe he will understand, because I think in the past it felt like as Americans we felt like we were doing something wrong, you know, in a capitalist market, and it felt like the fingers were being pointed at us, and I think now that we have this, we can kind of hopefully relax, and the Pope will understand a little bit about us, and having spent time in South America, and just his perspective is just you can't plan the experience that this Pope has had, and so we're grateful for that, and so I would say that it's a rejuvenated vigor for our Holy Catholic Church, and we're just excited and kind of waiting on the edge of our seats to see what's next here.
If you take it from the analogy, which is really, I think, what we're doing this morning of running an international business, not business, so let's say organization. The church is not a business. It's this for evangelization. It is the body of Christ, the fullness of truth. But just looking at that example or that analogy, if you look at his experience in terms of the church is universal, and he has such a universal and diverse background as a leader, because he, spent so much time in Peru. He's spent time in America. He was the head of the Augustinian order, all these different places he went, and how he meets with the people. He reminds me, again, if we're doing this from an analogy perspective, let's say the head of an international organization that's going around the world to see how the different groups are doing, which is what professionals, Catholic professionals, any professional should do if they're the head of a large organization, right?
Absolutely. I mean, he's done every job, and he's seen every perspective. He's, I'm not going to canonize him and say he's perfect, but I mean, what a wealth of experience and knowledge. And I think all of us, when he came out on that loggia and we saw that he, was the American Pope, we were waiting for him to speak in English. And I think a lot of us were disappointed he did not. But I think that, he was sending a message that, obviously he is an American by birth, but he is for everybody. And I think, as we've seen now, it's just been amazing to hear some of his homilies and commentary in English. Not having to have a translator to understand what he's saying has been just really, really positive and reassuring. And we are growing here in the United States and in North America in our Catholic faith and the Church. And we've got so many great apostolates that are coming up because of this new evangelization that St. Pope John Paul II really started, which Legatus was a result of that, but so many more organizations that have started. And I think the U.S. has a big responsibility here in the next, millennium to spread that faith back to Europe, to bring the faith back to all parts of the world. And the Pope is the Pope that we need at these times.
Now, I know you do pilgrimages to Rome on a regular basis, and I'm sure the next one you'll probably, I would think, have an audience with Pope Leo. Hopefully, do you think is that in the works right now, Stephen?
We do. We have a contingent of members that will be in Rome for the canonization, and God willing, we will have audience with the Holy Father. If not here in the fall, in the spring, when we go back during likely America Week.
Yeah, we call that America Week. That's such a fun week. It's so exciting because everybody's there for the NAC and for Focus, and it's just a huge, Legatus. Everybody's there. It's just fun. Who gave it the name America Week, by the way? Do you know?
I think I actually don't know for sure, but just with so many of, like I said, the apostates that you've mentioned coming over during that week, it's like you see more people from America there than you do here in America. It's like a family reunion, and it's joined by so many priests, bishops, and cardinals that it adds to the esprit de corps of our faith, and it's a real shot in the arm. So, anyways, we're obviously very supportive, love our Holy Father, and are supportive of our church in all aspects. And sometimes people will ask us, where is Legatus on the left or right or whatever, and we are Orthodox and faithful to the teachings of the Magisterium.
Amen.
There's
Amen.
Other sidebars there. So.
Drives me crazy when people say, are you a conservative or liberal Catholic? My response is, I'm Catholic, okay? There are some teachings that may people will put in a box and put in one category or the other, but if you're Catholic, there's always balance. So that's what's so important, and you do such a beautiful job of holding and teaching the church and the faith. So, Stephen, thanks so much. So if people want more information on the ways they can find out if they qualify for Legatus, how do they do that?
Yeah, legatus.org, or find us on social media. But legatus.org is our easiest way, or 1-866-LEGATUS. But, we are continuing to grow throughout North America, and would love to welcome more members. So just reach out to us if you are interested.
You know what we should do? We should, next year, maybe petition the NAC, the North American College, for their dinner or one of the events. Maybe you should ask them for a deep dish Chicago pizza on the menu, or Chicago hot dogs. What do you think?
I think we can talk Mark Randall into that. I mean, we've got some great people at the NAC.
You could talk to Mark, but I know Tom could probably have some influence with that too.
Well, that's true too.
But he won't eat that. I know Tom. He won't eat the pizza or the hot dogs.
That angle. Well, between Pizza Hut founders are Catholic and Legatus members in Wichita, and Tom with Domino's, I think we can make this happen.
All right, my dear. Well, great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for all you do with Legatus and, of course, educating people in the faith. Stephen Henley, president of Legatus, talking about Pope Leo's first 100 days. Some takeaways for Catholic professionals. We'll be right back on a Tuesday. Stay tuned. Hope you're having a beautiful Tuesday morning. It's August 19th. You're listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. First hour of Catholic Connection under our belts. And now we move to hour number 2, Due. And we are going to be on EWTN's Radio Extra, as we are every morning at this time of day. And we hope you can join us. We are going to have a really great discussion, as we always do, with Kelly Salomon with our Tuesday Newman Guide News. She's from the Cardinal Newman Society. So 2 big stories we're looking at. I don't know if you heard about this, but Kelly brought this to our attention. In Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, a university there has hired a pro-abortion, and I'm doing the air quotes, Catholic politician to serve at that school in a very prestigious way. And this is extremely troubling. We see this happening repeatedly. And I'm thankful that the Cardinal Newman Society is making people aware of it. And hopefully there'll be some challenges with this university. And also to pray for this particular politician, that he goes back to his roots, because his father was very pro-life and took a lot of heat for it. So we'll talk about that with Kelly, but also tips for kids going off to college. Kelly has some great ideas. And in our 2 cent segment, we're going to visit a really fun but interesting article, an important article on Church Pop today about mistakes we may make at Mass. So some clarification. So I think it'll be a great hour. Again, I do hope that you can join us on EWTN's Radio Extra, which is coming up in about 4 minutes. And don't forget to watch the weather closely, especially if you're on the East Coast, if you're in the Carolinas or on the Jersey Shore. Some bad weather moving in because of Aaron on the West Coast. Super hot. So make sure you take care of yourself and your loved ones. But stay tuned. Hour number 2 of Catholic Connection coming up again on EWTN's Radio Extra.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
It's a Tuesday morning. It's the second hour of Catholic Connection here on EWTN Radio Extra. Great to be with you on a Tuesday and every day. In the second hour today, of course, we will have, Kelly Salomon with the Cardinal Newman Society and our Newman Guide News. Okay, so there's two pretty big stories that we're going to be discussing with Kelly. One is, unfortunately, yet another Catholic in name-only university apparently hiring a very pro-abortion, and I use the air quotes right now, you can't see me, I'm in studio, but the air quotes, Catholic politician to serve in a very prominent position at their university. What kind of a message does this send? And what do we do about it? So we'll discuss with Kelly. And then another really great story to talk about. It's great to talk about this other thing because it's important to put it out in the public. It's not great what they did, but we need to address it, so that's important. So just let me clarify. But anyway, the second story we're going to be talking about will be some suggestions and tips for your youngsters that are going off to college. Sometimes it can be very, very intimidating. It can be intimidating for the students, but also intimidating for the parents as well. But Kelly's got you covered with some great advice for students. So that is our show on a Tuesday morning. Let's take a look at the weather because we've got some different things going on across the country. On the East Coast, we have the Outer Banks and other parts of the Carolinas, parts of New Jersey being affected by Erin, even though that storm is not making landfall. It is wreaking havoc in some ways. And then over on parts of the West Coast, especially California, we've got really warm temperatures. And then in other parts of the country, we've got some other issues with humidity and a lot of heat. So let's take a look. This is according to the National Weather Service. So we have tropical storm conditions and coastal flooding possible in the North Carolina area, Outer Banks more specifically. That will begin tomorrow. Tropical storm and storm surge watches are in effect, and Hurricane Erin is expected to bring life-threatening surf and rip currents, and this will happen along the East Coast beaches this week. And then we go over to other parts of the country, including California, where they're going to see extreme heat starting probably tomorrow and into the weekend. And then we also have hot to extremely hot temperatures continuing across the southern plains and the Mississippi Valley, and that's going to happen today. So that's the weather. Keep an eye on things if you're in any of those affected areas. Summer continues, still summer on the calendar. Don't forget that. Get out and enjoy it, but take us with you. Right now at almost 3 minutes past the hour, we need to get to the news as we always do. So let's see what's happening here on EWTN Radio Extra. Well, President Trump and U.S. European allies are expressing cautious optimism about a deal to end the Ukraine-Russia war. Tammy Trujillo tells us more.
Trump hosted Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky, European leaders, and the head of NATO at the White House Monday to try and hammer out a deal. Trump and Zelensky spoke one-on-one first and both called their meeting productive. Every leader, including Trump, has indicated any deal would have to involve American security for Ukraine to head off any more Russian aggression. The president says he's already spoken to Russia's Vladimir Putin by phone about the developments and is hoping to set up a future three-way meeting between himself, Putin, and Zelensky. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Meanwhile, Russia carrying out drone attacks on central Ukraine overnight, with local officials saying it shows the Russian President Vladimir Putin does not want peace. Those attacks coming a day after that meeting, as we mentioned, between President Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and European leaders at the White House to talk about, again, how to eventually end that war that began back in 2022 with Russia's invasion. It was the largest overnight attack by Russia this month, with Ukrainian officials also saying 270 drones and nearly a dozen missiles were launched. And Hamas says it will accept the latest ceasefire proposal to end the conflict with Gaza. But as Blake Sifton tells us, whether Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu can get on board, well, that remains to be seen.
Hamas said on Monday that they have accepted a new proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza put forth by Qatari and Egyptian mediators. The proposal is said to be very similar to one discussed last month without a breakthrough, and involves a 60-day ceasefire that would see the release of roughly half of the Israeli hostages remaining in captivity in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. On Saturday, Prime Minister Netanyahu again insisted that Israel is no longer interested in partial deals and will only agree to end the war if Hamas releases all of the hostages at once and agrees to various conditions. Blake Sifton, Tel Aviv.
Meanwhile, Father Gabriel Romanelli, a parish priest of the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza, telling Catholic media, including Vatican media, that the parish neighborhood in Gaza City is not under an evacuation order, as earlier reported by some outlets. He said there has been no order of evacuation in this area for our neighborhood, in areas in the old city of Gaza. He also said that, however, things are heating up and that hundreds of people, if you recall, took refuge at the only Catholic church in Gaza since the outbreak of the war back on October 7th of 2023. A tank round struck the church on July 17th, killing 3 people and injuring several others, including Father Romanelli, whose leg was slightly wounded. In the wake of that incident, Pope Leo prayed for the victims by name, calling for an end to the barbarism of war and expressing his hopes for a peaceful resolution to that conflict in the Middle East. An Ohio man is now admitting to attacking a group of Ohio State students in Columbus simply because they are Jewish. Timur Mamatov pleading guilty to violations of the Hate Crimes Prevention Act in federal court just recently, a few days ago. U.S. prosecutors say he was with his friend outside a bar near the OSU campus in November of 23 when he punched a student after seeing that he was wearing a necklace with a Jewish symbol. At least one other student was hurt in the fight as well. Mamatov will be sentenced by a federal district court judge in the future. The Council of European Bishops Conference and the Conference of European Churches have released a joint statement ahead of the 2025 season of creation. Devin Watkins with Vatican News tells us the annual period of prayer for our common home begins on September 1st, the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation, and runs all the way until October 4th, so over a month, on the feast, of course, of the beloved St. Francis of Assisi.
In their statement, European church leaders recalled the prophet Isaiah's vision of a garden of peace, which points to the theme for this year's event, Peace with Creation. They also invited Christian communities to embrace a sober life and respect the gifts of creation while rejecting the exploitation of natural resources and all people. The ecumenical leaders said the reference to Isaiah's vision of peace can lead humanity to return to a way of life rooted in trust and devotion to God. Seeking peace with creation is not an abstract ideal, but a daily commitment, they said, adding that it is a call to live in a way that honors the giver of life. Even if our world can hardly be seen as a garden of peace nowadays, said the church leaders, God constantly offers humanity an alternative to catastrophe. The season of creation comes ahead of the UN's COP30 climate conference in Belém, Brazil, which is set for November 10th through 21st later this year. The joint statement expresses hope that world leaders will prioritize the needs of the poor and vulnerable while directing international relations toward the common good. Christians, they said, are invited to prayer, conversion, and advocacy so that our way of living may echo what we believe and confess.
President Trump moving to eliminate mail-in ballots ahead of the 2026 midterm elections.
We're going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country.
The president sharing a post on Truth Social outlining his plan to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots, and it targets what he called highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines. Trump has previously claimed that there's been widespread voter fraud involving mail-in ballots and pledged to fight for election integrity, while the president's post is calling for an end to the mail-in ballots. An effort to dramatically overhaul the way federal elections are run has faced, though, legal roadblocks in recent months. A federal judge in San Antonio hearing arguments in a lawsuit over the states of Texas's new Ten Commandments law. Jonathan Sainez with the group Texas Values says there's plenty of legal precedent as to why the Bible verses can be hung in various school classrooms. The law is being challenged by the ACLU, arguing that it violates the separation of church and state. It does go into effect next month, but posters of the Ten Commandments are already being posted in several Texas school districts. And younger generations are apparently picking up the Bible in increasing numbers, and it's a trend that's continuing not only here but around the world. The UK's Quiet Revival report shows a 16% increase in church attendance among 18 to 24-year-olds. In Russia, meanwhile, seeing sales of the Bible growing by 50% alone, and that happened last year. A woman from Arizona is recovering after she was beaten unconscious and bloody during a concert at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena over the weekend. This man says the entire event was a mess as far as crowd control goes.
It was honestly out of control. It was a circus. It was not safe, and I'm very angry.
It happened on Saturday night during a sold-out Rufus du Sol concert. The woman says she and a friend accidentally spilled a little bit of a drink on a man and had immediately apologized for it. The man claimed it was intentional, and when he returned about a half an hour later, punched her in the face. A video shows a man launching himself into a group of people and throwing at least 5 punches, knocking the woman out. He has yet to be arrested. And the first hurricane of the 2025 Atlantic season is churning to the east of the Bahamas, now as a Category 3 storm. As of Monday night, the storm had maximum sustained winds of 125 miles an hour. Forecasters say Hurricane Erin is expected to bring, as we mentioned in the weather forecast, high surf and possible tropical storm conditions to part of the Bahamas and the U.S. Atlantic coast. North Carolina's Outer Banks could see coastal flooding and tropical storm conditions, and that'll happen later tomorrow. And meanwhile, along the Jersey Shore, some communities there have already banned swimming at their beaches because of the dangerous surf conditions the storm is creating. On the West Coast, we also mentioned this in the weather forecast. Daniel Martindale tells us an extreme heat wave is expected to start baking Southern California. That's supposed to start tomorrow. Daniel Martindale fills us in.
Forecasters say the heat will peak on Thursday and Friday with highs of 94 degrees in downtown Los Angeles and highs of 108 degrees in Woodland Hills. Highs will be 10 to 20 degrees above normal and could break records. Extreme heat and fire weather advisories for much of the region take effect tomorrow and will last through Saturday night. Portions of the mountains and foothills of LA and Ventura counties will be under a red flag warning during that time due to gusty winds and low relative humidity. I'm Daniel Martindale.
The state of West Virginia is suing the company it considers the main architect of the opioid crisis, pharmacy benefits manager Express Scripts. West Virginia Attorney General Jamie McCuskey says the lawsuit claims Express Scripts, now known as Evernorth Health, committed misconduct that was complex, far-reaching, violating state and federal health laws in many ways. The suit claims, among other things, Evernorth conspired with opioid manufacturers to deceptively market the drugs. And Michael Kastner tells us an agreement has now been reached between Air Canada and the union representing over 10,000 striking flight attendants.
The Air Canada component of the Canadian Union of Public Employees took to Facebook early Tuesday morning with a highly anticipated 4-word update. The strike has ended. A labor relations board had already declared the walkout by flight attendants illegal, but they defied a government order to return to work over the weekend and continued pressing for better pay and scheduling. Air Canada will now gradually begin resuming operations after industry analysts said tens of thousands of people saw their flights canceled worldwide. I'm Michael Kastner.
And it is a Tuesday morning. We appreciate your listenership here at Catholic Connection, the second hour. This program is produced by EWTN, and this hour we are on EWTN's Radio Extra. Just a reminder to be careful out there because we've got some very troublesome weather all over the place. You just heard about the heat in California. We also have heat down south, and we have that storm surge along the East Coast thanks to the first official hurricane of the Atlantic hurricane season, Hurricane Erin, stirring things up, but not in a good way on the East Coast with lots of storm surges, so be careful out there. We'll be right back on a Tuesday, our 2 cents, talking about ways to do our best in Mass, some mistakes we make of which we might not even be aware. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, on a Tuesday. It's August 19th. Great to be with you every day here on Catholic Connection, the second hour of our program here at EWTN Radio Extra. We have so many really cool outlets that can help us all grow in our faith, including Church Pop. And you can check it out at churchpop.com. So I'm on their email list, which is really easy to do. It's free. You just sign up and you get their daily bulletins, and they give you a summary of their news articles. I think this was really helpful. Here are 6 common mistakes during Mass and how to correct them as opportunities for spiritual growth. Now, look, we are all growing in our faith, and if we are still here, the Lord is not through with us yet. And it could be maybe by no fault of our own, or maybe we just take it too much for granted and we get a little careless, we're not paying attention. Some of us make mistakes during Mass. And so the question they pose in this article, again, you can find it on churchpop.com, has any of this ever happened to you? Through ignorance or simple carelessness, some Catholics make mistakes during Mass. The heralds of the gospel offer practical guidance on how to avoid these errors, enabling us to experience a Eucharist with greater reverence and love. The article goes on to say on their social media platform, the religious association shared tips for improving our Mass participation, reminding us that even small corrections help safeguard what is sacred. And I love this statement that the organization makes. The liturgy is not a human invention. It is a living heritage of the Church, which as mother and teacher shows us the most worthy way to worship God. And they emphasize this in their helpful information. And before we get into the 6 common mistakes, I do want to make a point. I can remember when I was on my way back into the Catholic Church and I was getting some criticism from former Catholics who fell away, maybe had a bad experience in the faith, and became very, very zealot anti-Catholic fundamentalists. And they did not have, a good impression of the Church, and I believe, based on my conversations with them, that they were probably not taught or were taught incorrectly. And they did not understand, and maybe weren't even, and again, maybe by no fault of their own, exposed to the beauty and the truth of the Mass. One of the biggest criticisms we get, and maybe you've run into this as well, is how the Church supposedly is not scriptural. And when you think about the Mass, nothing could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, everything in the Mass, the opening prayer, everything that we do during the consecration, everything is scriptural. The only thing that's not scriptural, the prayers of the faithful, right? The intercessions, the homily, which is based on Scripture, and then any announcements that are made. Everything else is directly from Scripture. And you don't believe me, just think about it, right? You have the first reading, you have the responsorial psalm, you have the second reading, if it's the weekend Mass. You have the gospel, then you have the homily, and then you have, of course, the offertory, and then the celebration of the Eucharist, the consecration. Everything is scriptural. There's a lot of misunderstandings about the Mass, and I often ask people, you guys don't have the Bible. What do you mean? We gave you the Bible. Anyway, I think another mistake that we make as Catholics is not being aware not only of how sacred the liturgy is, as it says in this article, but how our Mass is scriptural, and that it dates back to the beginning of Christianity. All right, 6 common mistakes. Number 1, after the offertory, some parishioners are unsure when to stand. Once a priest has prepared the offerings and washed his hands, he addresses the congregation saying, "Pray, brothers." At that moment, everyone should rise to respond, "May the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands." Number 2, at the end of the Eucharistic prayer, some faithful recite the final doxology along with the priest. However, only the celebrant proclaims through him, with him, and in him. Not even concelebrating priests join in aloud. At this point, the rest of the congregation remains silent. Number 3, adding amen to the Lord's Prayer. At Mass, the Lord's Prayer does not end with amen because it continues immediately with the priest's prayer. "Deliver us, Lord, from every evil." Only afterward do the faithful respond, "For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever." I think these are, we're only on number 3, but I think these tips are really, really helpful to recognize some of the mistakes we make during Mass and how to correct them, and using them as opportunities for spiritual growth. Saying the prayer for peace, number 4. The words, "Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, 'Peace I leave you, my peace I give you,' belong to the priest alone. However beautiful this prayer may be, it is not said by the congregation." All right, so this next one is a biggie. Next 2, I should say. Leaving during Mass. Mass is a sacred celebration. If you were present at Calvary, would you step away for a glass of water? Unless there is a serious health need, remain and offer that sacrifice to God. Now, this is a very important point. How many times do we see people oftentimes getting up, and I used to do this before I was faithful and came back to the church, and I'd go to Mass. Okay, I went, boo, check the box. So we're all guilty of it, I think, at some point or another. But you see people leaving sometimes right after they receive Jesus in the Eucharist, not even stopping to pray after they receive him, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And this point, if you were present, this question they ask, If you were present at Calvary, would you step away for a glass of water? And again, unless there is a serious health need, remain and offer that sacrifice to God. I remember one time, this is a true story, I was at Mass, and I can't remember where I was. Was it at my parish or was I out at a speaking engagement? And someone's phone went off on their way up to communion, and they answered it and began talking. And I could tell from the conversation, because the person wasn't exactly speaking softly, that it wasn't an emergency. So this comes with that whole idea of respect. Now, they could have forgotten to turn off the phone. Okay, fine, we all make mistakes. But answering it as you're walking up to receive Jesus, again, if it's an emergency, that's a different situation. But this comes along the same lines of leaving during Mass and then arriving late to Mass. That's number 6. We strive to be punctual for important appointments, a meeting, dinner, visit, or party. How much more effort should we make to be on time for an encounter with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? The heralds stress that these points are not merely external rules. Rather, they serve as a thermometer to gauge the value we give to the sacred office and the sacred sacrifice of Calvary. And I love the way they end this article. Luke 16:10. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones. And the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. Now, there could be a good reason why people are late. It's especially difficult, I'm sure, for families if they have several children to get everybody up and dressed, and it's a real effort. I understand that. But I think this is something, in all honesty, when we look in the mirror and look in our hearts, that we all have to think about. We've all done this, I'm sure. I know I have, in terms of arriving late or leaving early. I went to confession over it more than once. Realizing what we have, or not realizing it actually, what we have in the gift of the Eucharist celebration, the Mass. It's a highest form of prayer. And so the more we can understand it, the more we can appreciate even the small things that we're supposed to be doing in Mass can add to our spiritual growth. And I think it helps us reflect on, again, our respect for the sacraments, our appreciation for the sacraments. Speaking of people leaving during Mass, so my pastor, who's very tall, he's 6'7", really, really tall guy. And he was so tired of people leaving right after receiving Jesus and not stopping to pray that he would go and stand outside the doors. And there's one section in our area that's a little bit busier than the other because it's closer to the parking lot. And so he would do this for a while. He was doing this for a while until people finally got the message. And he'd go on one side of the church and then go on the other. And he would just stand there and talk to people as they were leaving Mass. Obviously, he wasn't the celebrant. And he'd say, "Hey, it's Monsignor Mike. What's going on? What do you got going on? You have an emergency? Is everything okay?" And just nicely question them as to why they're leaving Mass early. And not to scold them or to insult them, but to get them to think about whom they just received and how beautiful it is to have this blessing of the highest form of Mass, highest form of prayer, the sacred Mass and the Eucharist, the source and summit of our faith. So check out this cool article on churchpop.com, 6 common mistakes Catholics make at Mass and how to avoid them. We'll be right back. We so appreciate the great work of the Cardinal Newman Society, which is why we have them on every week with Newman Guide News and our friend Kelly Salomon. So, Kelly, this one is hitting pretty close to home for me, the first story we're going to discuss. And this has to do with my husband's hometown, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and actually his high school, Scranton Prep, where Casey, the person that we're going to discuss, also graduated from. And unfortunately, Bob Casey Jr. does not have the same pro-life zeal that his father did, or made a big turn on that, unfortunately, and not in the right direction. So tell us what you're covering in relationship to Scranton, or the University of Scranton in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yes, this is an unfortunate story. We're just kicking off the school year, and, already we're hearing news about what decisions schools and colleges have made over the summertime. And the University of Scranton is a Jesuit-run university in Pennsylvania that unfortunately has hired former Senator Bob Casey Jr. as its distinguished fellow in public service. Part of his role will include mentoring students. And as you mentioned, Teresa, unfortunately, he's had this evolution on the abortion issue over the years, and like you said, not in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm. It's such a shame because his father was such a strong pro-lifer, correct?
That's correct. You know, I've done some research on Bob Casey and his father this week as this came to light of wondering why a Catholic university would be hiring someone who ran his last campaign on a pro-abortion platform. His father was a pro-life Democrat in the 1980s and 90s. An alum of the University of Scranton actually took to another publication to write an article about why he was so sad that his alma mater was hiring someone to mentor students who ran on a pro-abortion platform. And he brought up his father, and he said that Bob Casey's father wrote a book entitled Fighting for Life, in which he championed the life of unborn children.
I mean, this is really, I think, is setting an example and not a good one. What is this going to do in terms of influencing students at that college? Because he might not be representing this various issue, but it makes a statement that it doesn't matter. You can be Catholic and you could vote against church teaching very publicly and work very publicly against it.
Exactly. That we know that someone's witness is so important in the lives of students. And, you know, this decision was really championed by the university. The university president in the press release said, Father Joseph Marina, the university president, said, "I'm truly delighted to welcome Senator Casey to our university. His Jesuit education has served him well for decades, and I have no doubt he will continue to bring his Jesuit values to bear in this exciting new role. I'm very grateful to the senator and the leagues for making this initiative possible." Right? And so what message is that sending, that a Jesuit education is compatible with a pro-abortion platform, also a platform that included pushing for IVF and contraception? I went to Senator Casey's website for his campaign in 2024, and there's a whole press release announcing Reproductive Freedom for All, the pro-abortion organization, endorsing Bob Casey for his reelection. And the Reproductive Freedom for All president praises Senator Casey in meeting the moment and recognizing that action is needed to protect abortion rights and access nationwide. So sad. And there's a quote from Senator Casey himself saying, "Women's rights are at stake in this election, including access to reproductive health care, IVF, and contraception." He even went on to say, "The difference between me and my opponent is clear. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, my opponent said it made him very, very happy. I voted for a Women's Health Protection Act to restore the protections of Roe. I'm grateful for the support of Reproductive Freedom for All in this critical election. Together, we'll keep fighting to protect these critical rights for people across Pennsylvania and across the country."
With all of this so public, right? So very public on his website,
right,
and statements he's made in the past, debates he's done, you still have the president of the University of Scranton saying these things. In addition, the article that you sent me from The Spectator, which I read, which was very, very well written, the president also said that Casey is perfect for the role of forming men and women to be, here's the clincher though, read between the lines with this one, Kelly, agents of social change. So the priest is obviously in agreement with Casey. Obviously, he put them in this position, thinking that the social change has to come about. So we have to, get rid of some of these tried and true teachings, or the preeminent issue that the bishops call, which is life. So this is extremely troubling. I'm so glad you brought this to our attention. Do you know if they've gotten any other feedback at the University of Scranton about this appointment?
I was so grateful to see several publications posting articles about this and featuring other alum of the university who are upset about this decision. I hope that more alumni and Catholic parents generally will let the university know that they're happy with this, that our Catholic institutions should be holding up as role models those who do not publicly defy Catholic moral teaching, right? As you said, Teresa, these are very public statements going against Catholic moral teaching. It's the same thing we talk about when Catholic colleges bring in commencement speakers who publicly oppose the faith, right? Why choose these as the witnesses and the role models for your students? Senator Casey said, that he wants he said in his quote that I believe it's critically important that young people are inspired and even taught that if you serve in public office, you have to do it ethically, right? And how does this square with the campaign that he's platformed on, and what message does this send to students? Again, I think the alum in that article that you mentioned, Teresa, at The Spectator, raises some great questions about why does a Catholic university hire him to mentor students? What message does this sound? This is an expensive Catholic education. What are students receiving from their investment in this kind of education?
What can we do? Obviously, some of the Catholic media have picked this up in conservative media. What can people, especially in the Diocese of Scranton, or people who are in that area, northeastern Pennsylvania, or maybe they have gone to the University of Scranton, which does have a good reputation in terms of being a solid educational place. I mean, outside of the whole Catholic problem. But what can we do to speak up about this, do you think, Kelly?
Yes, I think, send the University of Scranton your information, send your local bishop and your priest, make them aware of this and let them know. And then also let Catholic families aware of that this type of thing is happening, unfortunately, at Catholic colleges all the time. And that's why you and I, Teresa, have this Newman Guide News segment, because there is an option that you don't have to choose any institution to attend, that you can invest in a faithful Catholic education where these colleges go out of their way to bring in role models and witnesses of the faith who are very public about their pro-life stance, right? And show students how they can strive to live in line with church teaching throughout their lives.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, too, that I remember the controversy with Notre Dame many years ago when Obama came to speak, if you remember that, at the commencement address, which was a huge story. And we took 2 buses from the Archdiocese of Detroit down there to just stand peacefully in peaceful protest and pray. But we have to remember that a lot of these schools are run by orders, as is the University of Scranton. It's a Jesuit school. And the Archdiocese or the diocese may not be able to remove a particular person, but certainly we can speak out to the school and let people know that this is just unacceptable. Speaking of college, happy and successful students, we have a checklist for growing your faith. We're going to talk about that back to school topic next. Stay tuned. That time of year, many students going off to college right now as we speak, as a matter of fact. Some students start in August. My college, Central Michigan University, used to always start the 3rd weekend of August, so it would be the weekend this weekend that I would be going up there. But that was a long time ago. However, appreciate this beautiful article that was done by a guest contributor, and it is the happy and successful students. It's a few years old, but it's evergreen. The happy and successful student, sober and chaste. And there's a wonderful checklist in terms of what you can do to help your kids and fellow students, if you're a student going, really have a successful start of your college career. And really good stuff, I think, Kelly, to keep with you, right, for your entire career in college.
Absolutely. All of us can think of a student or a family who might have a student going off to college. These are some great articles on the Cardinal Newman Society website to share with those families and help those students start off on a strong foot, especially their freshman year, to get involved with the right crowds and with other friends who are going to lift them up and help them become the best version of themselves. And, some things to think about right off the bat of making a plan for making it to weekly mass, and how often are you going to go to confession, and what service opportunities can you sign up for, right? So that you can get started on a good path in college and create those lifelong friends who can really help you with your future and becoming the kind of person God wants you to be.
Yeah, so let's go through the article. There's some 3 pretty big things here which really have an impact, and you hear it and you're thinking, wow. And if you think about the connection and connect the dots between this, it's the big 3. It's these are not the only things that the article says that for being a good Christian, obviously, but also it's very helpful in college. But these are really, really important. And unfortunately, how many horror stories do we hear that just the opposite is taking place on college campuses and elsewhere? So chastity is first up. Let's talk about that.
Yes, exactly. We know that this is a challenge for all of us our whole lives, but especially as students are going off to college for the first time. are living in student residences, hopefully are attending a good Catholic college where you have single-sex residences and reasonable dorm policies that promote chastity. You know, we see at many secular institutions where dorms are not single-sex and students of the opposite sex can be in each other's dorm rooms at any time of the day or night at many places. So this is something to look into as well before you even choose a college. But this article, we had a guest contributor of Focus, which does great work on many college campuses, and they wrote this article for us on how to build up chastity, sobriety, and excellence as you go off to college. And so, you know, there's great tips they give in here. Make boundaries for yourself. Commit to being faithful to these boundaries, right? Go out of your way to make good friends. I can't emphasize that enough, that I receive so many calls from parents who call me up after the first couple weeks of their students' college year, and they say they just fell in with the wrong crowd. They fell in with the group that's always drinking. They fell in with the group that's obsessed with video games, right? Look for friends who are not obsessed with activities that are just a waste of time or, at worst, derail your well-being, right? Concentrate on your studies. Make sure you actually go to class and get sleep at night so that you can make it to your classes. You know, you're preparing for your profession, so it's important to make the most of those classes, taking care of your physical well-being, and seek out the wisdom and the great value that you could be receiving through your education.
Well, this whole idea of chastity, I think it's important, and I think one book I would recommend, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Miriam Grossman, but she was a doctor on a college campus, and she would see all these different, she's a psychiatrist and an MD, obviously, but she would see all these young women coming to her, and she would do counseling, and she said the one thing they had in common, she found out after she started asking them questions, is they were very promiscuous. She said they were very good about taking care of their health, they were very good about studying, but they were miserable, and they had all these emotional problems. And then she started asking questions, and they started talking about their sex life, and that they were basically thinking that this is what they had to do, this is what was required of them. And she could not believe how much it impacted them. So she did so much research, Kelly, and this again proves the beauty of the Catholic Church and what the Church teaches about sexuality. And in her research, she found that every time, and I think Theology of the Body teaches this as well, every time a woman has relations with a man, she's attached to that person. And so you're walking around with all this baggage in terms of emotions and the psychological aspect. So her book, You're Teaching My Children What, is a really, really good book, I think, to grab. It's from Simon & Schuster. It came out several years ago. It's one of her first books. But she talks about this, and she's not even Catholic. She's not even Christian. And she's talking about how important it is for these kids not to jump around. It's not good for us. Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a great resource, Teresa. I think sometimes those resources make such a difference, even from, you know, a secular perspective. Like, I remember reading an article about cohabitation before marriage and how it affects the divorce rate, right? And so sometimes these studies that just show the statistics can be eye-opening for young people, and hopefully they also can get involved in whatever Theology of the Body programming is available on campus, and making use of their theology classes, of seeking out campus ministry, and a good spiritual advisor, of remaining close to the sacraments, because, you know, God is love. We're made in God's image and likeness, and we're created to love in a really authentic way. And that's what's going to bring us happiness, right? And these passing desires will not bring us that deep happiness that young women and young men are longing for on these campuses. Amen. Having our weekly conversation with Kelly Salomon, VP of Newman Guide Programs from the Cardinal Newman Society. It's Newman Guide News on a Tuesday. The next topic is really huge as well, the issue of sobriety, because the issue of binge drinking is such a problem on campus, and we're seeing more and more articles, including a study that came out just this week, actually just yesterday, about alcohol and how bad it is health-wise for you. I mean, once in a while, if you're of legal age and you have a glass of wine with friends or something, or a cocktail, but to the extent that some of these young people are engaging in very unhealthy activity that could lead to other things, This is a real issue of which people have to be aware.
It is, and it's a big topic on college campuses. As you mentioned, the binge drinking rate is very significant on most college campuses today, and so it's important to remember that drunkenness is a sin. It's using our bodies, souls, and sobriety is enjoying the gift of alcohol in the way that God intended. The article goes on to share about temperance is the virtue that controls our appetites for things like food, drink, and sex. Another word for temperance is self-control. It's not about not doing things. It's about placing your desires in the right order. Again, college can be a great opportunity. It's a turning point. It's a time of decision. It can help propel you forward and help be a time that you grow in virtue, grow in wisdom, or it can be a time that you develop habits that unfortunately can stay with you for many years and impact your profession, your vocation, your children, right? So it's really a critical training ground for getting those habits and virtues that can be such a blessing to your family and your workplace and your community if you put in that effort during these college years.
Well, the statistics in this particular article, and by the way, I think you can still find it on the Cardinal Newman Society. We'll see if we can reference it for people, Kelly, before we wrap up. But this really struck me. Did you know that you could fill 3,500 Olympic-sized swimming pools with the amount of beer, wine, and liquor consumed by American college students each year? Did you also know that 80% to 90% of campus violence is linked to alcohol abuse, and 90% of all rapes on college campuses involve alcohol? Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that doesn't raise your concern.
Statistics, and you know that this is not all fun and games. That parents and students need to take seriously the formation of the young person and put themselves around good friends and in good environments, and be ready to make good decisions when it comes to alcohol on campus.
And something you said earlier is super important. You mentioned going to class, and that might strike people as odd. Well, wait a minute. Why wouldn't they go to class? Well, first of all, if you're going away to school, I used to see this all the time. You're not under your parents' direction, and the college, you're paying for the courses, but the college is not going to be your babysitter and check up on you. They may tell you when you get to class you're basically going to flunk because you haven't completed this course, but right. A lot of students, because they get so involved in these other things that we mentioned, they're, God forbid, sleeping around, having all these very promiscuous relationships, or they're over drinking, they're involved in binge drinking. They're choosing not to go to class for whatever reason. Nobody's telling them to go to class. So this whole idea of structure, and this is where the prayer comes in, and you praying obviously for your children, but the prayer and engaging with your kids to say make sure that they have these healthy environments as opposed to these other types of environments, right?
Amen. Yes, it does. It does feel funny to say, don't forget you need to go to class, but
it happens all the time.
That is what so many freshman students fall into for the first time. And, I slept through my alarm again. It'll be fine. I'll make up for it next time.
I had a roommate who said she didn't want to go outside because the wind was blowing and it was too cold, literally.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Another roommate of mine skipped class so she could go be with her boyfriend who was at a college about a half an hour away, and she would go there, and she would leave on like a Wednesday, wouldn't come back till like a Tuesday, and we're like, okay, well, it's your decision. I don't even know if she ever got her degree, but and this was back. Come on, I'm 66 years old. We'll be 66 in 2 weeks. I'm in my mid 60s, and this was happening back then. You think it's not happening now?
Right. Exactly. Yes, it is happening, and being a good student, making good friends, and then of course growing closer to God, right?
Yep.
And there's so many opportunities for that at a Newman Guide College, but setting up a little plan, talking through it with your friends, good wholesome friends, or your parents, or a spiritual advisor, setting up a plan for even your prayer life and what spiritual opportunities and campus ministry opportunities you're going to be involved with can help with these other areas, right? Can help you to strive for excellence as a student, can help you strive for excellence in chastity and sobriety.
So this article, Kelly, could it be available? Where would people find it? Because I think it's very, very helpful. Where would they find it on your website?
If they go to the search bar at cardinalnewmansociety.org, they can search for the happy and successful student, sober and chaste. I also recommend Tips for Keeping Your Faith Alive in College by Christopher Kazor on our website. Mm-hmm. He goes into the topics of being a good student and making good friends and growing closer to God. Shares some great experiences. He shares right at the beginning about one of his friends who was shocked that about his friend losing his faith during college right off the bat. Right, even for someone who spent 8 years in Catholic grade school, both of him and his friend attended Catholic high school for 4 years, and then immediately went off to college and lost his faith. So this is the perspective we're coming from, knowing that so many students do lose their faith and lose their way in college. These articles provide some great tips in keeping on the straight and narrow path, and hopefully having a really wonderful, happy, joyful, virtue-filled college experience.
Because it can be that. I mean, I really wish we had the Newman Society when I was back in school, back in the dark ages. I probably would have fared a lot better. I did okay, but, a lot of us fall into that temptation thing, and I did. I fell away from my faith in college, but thanks be to God, God found me again. Kelly, always great to talk with you. Really appreciate the effort and how you bring so many important topics to us. Kelly Salomon, VP of Newman Guide Programs at the Cardinal Newman Society, newmansociety.org. She joins us every Tuesday for Newman Guide News here on Catholic Connection. We'll be right back on a Tuesday.
Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate your listenership. Thanks for listening to our number 2 Due Catholic Connection, production of EWTN Radio. EWTN.com for all the great resources. CardinalNewmanSociety.org, another great resource. Coming up tomorrow, it's a Wednesday, and that means Joni's with us, Jones Rome, and things are really building in Italia, in Roma, for the upcoming, and you heard Stephen Henley talking about in the first hour from Legatus of Catholic Connection, talking about the wonderful canonizations of Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis. A reminder to please check out my Saints in Italy series, because I have a whole segment on Carlo and St. Mary Major, so it's free. And close to 7,000 people have already signed up for it. It's connected to my book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. You can go to EWTN.com/Saints in Italy. It's a great study for OCIA. My parish is using it in their OCIA programs. Also, just for personal study, there's reflection questions. There is a notebook you can download, and it's all for free. So check it out from our wonderful mission advancement team. That's EWTN.com/Saints in Italy. We're going to be talking about the saints tomorrow with an in-studio guest. We're also going to be talking about, in addition to having Joni on, we are going to be talking about the power of prayer with Father Scalia. I just think the world of him. He is amazing. He's an author, he's a speaker, and he's a holy, holy Catholic priest. So it should be a great show. I do hope you can tune in for the entire 2 hours tomorrow and every day here on EWTN. Have a great Tuesday. Talk to you on a Wednesday. Ciao, ciao.